On this electrifying episode, we consider the contents of Starlog magazine from 1978 in issues 17 and 18, featuring Joe Crowe and Gary Mitchel discuss sci-fi classics of the 1978 fall TV season. Paul Mount fills us in on Gerry Anderson's Space 1999 report. Tony Barletta discusses superhero shows including Wonder Woman, Spider-Man, The Incredible Hulk, and Doctor Strange. Rebel Legion members Mike and Kyleigh Jones consider the works of Star Wars producer Gary Kurtz. In the article, The Empire Strikes Back, Dr. Mego, Paul Clarke, reminisces on what it was like to mail away for toys and collectibles. All this, plus Steven Spielberg, Battlestar Galactica, Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, and more on
StarPodLog.
Greetings and felicitations.
Hip hip hurrah, tally ho.
Hey, my little Georgia Peach.
Hey, Puddin'.
I'm Nayar.
And I'm Kavora. We grew up in the 70s and 80s and love classic science fiction and fantasy.
On each episode of our show, we consider the contents in 2 issues of Starlog magazine and discuss what fandom was like years ago.
But we leave the Star Trek-related content to our other podcast, StarPod Trek. If you are listening to us on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and leave a comment below. Feel free to join our Facebook group, too. We look forward to meeting our listeners at the following upcoming conventions.
We will be attending Superman Celebration, July 30th through August 1st. What do you love about Superman Celebration?
It's just a lot of fun. It's a big festival. It's mostly outside, and it has the big statue of Superman, and we just love celebrating Superman and all the DC heroes.
Also, August 6th through 8th, the ROCK-N-POD EXPO, Nashville, Tennessee. It's essentially a Comic-Con for rock and heavy metal fans. I mean, it's really cool. I go every year. Look forward to this one. And also, the greatest of them all, DragonCon, September 2nd through the 6th. What can we say about DragonCon?
We go every year. I mean, it's like a 5-day party.
Yeah, Atlanta is taken over by geeks, and it's every cool thing that you could think of under, 6 rooftops?
Yeah, it's spread out over, 5 hotels plus the America's Mart. And it covers just about every geeky fandom. It's really a pop culture convention.
And we will be conducting multiple panels there and moderating as well. So we definitely look forward to that. Art Starlog magazine, issue number 17, cover date October 1978. First article we're going to discuss, Filming the Fantastic, Steven Spielberg.
At the age of 10, Steven Spielberg disobeyed his parents' orders and saw I Was a Teenage Werewolf. He had nightmares for 2 weeks. 20 years later, Spielberg himself now causes countless numbers of film fanatics to lose sleep with his own widescreen scenarios.
It's amazing to look at this article, and it's actually a short biography about Steven Spielberg. He was raised in a household that thought that watching TV and movies was generally a waste of time, especially anything like horror, fantasy, sci-fi, which is kind of wild when you think about it, looking at what he's produced. He didn't have a background in the fantastic.
It's interesting. It's kind of like not being allowed those things growing up is what made him want those things even more.
And he credits Famous Monsters of Filmland for exposing him to this. And yes, he did have to sneak out to see I Was a Teenage Werewolf. And it gripped his imagination like he couldn't believe. Around 16 years old, he decided that he wanted to make his own home movie. And it would be a production. It wouldn't be just like most of us did with camcorders or small film recorders. But he actually wanted to produce it on a higher level because he started finding out more and more about the industry. So he did a lot of odd jobs including some work with hedges and trees, whitewashing trees. I don't even know what that is. Like, I had a paper route as a kid when I needed money. You know, I always had a paper route and also mow lawns, things like that. But he was super ambitious, and his father actually nurtured this idea of creating a movie. So at such a young age, he did have a production. He actually had a premiere of it, and he got the money back plus $50. And this just spurred him on to do more.
It's a great inspiration. But yeah, he is like, he's such a big thinker, and he had all these dreams, and it's like you couldn't hold him back. I mean, that's what makes a great movie director.
Yeah, he ended up doing some writing work as well. He did some work with Night Gallery, so he said he did meet Rod Serling at one time, and he said Rod Serling was such an inspiration because he was so positive. Now think about that. Just the positivity of a person inspired him to do more.
That's great. I mean, that shows what it is to just be nice to someone, what it can encourage them to do, and you might not even know it.
Yes, he ended up doing some scripts that didn't make it to the screen for The Man from U.N.C.L.E. And as time went on, he moved out of Arizona. His family moved to California, and he felt that he wanted to do more things. And the thing that helped him out, that his idea of Jaws and bringing this idea of a shark that's greater than life, like, what category would you call Jaws? Because that's the unique thing. Jaws is kind of multi-genre when you think about it.
I think it's a thriller, is what they would call it.
I would say that. Yeah, some people even call it a horror movie, an action movie.
And it is those things too. I mean, as a kid, I avoided it because I just thought it was a scary movie. I mean,
but that's the idea, is he didn't want to make a genre film per se, but he had big ideas. And when it came to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, he credits his father as being an inspiration. When he was 10 years old, his father said, "Hey, let's go out and look at the stars." His father knew that there was a meteor shower coming, that where they were, they didn't have light pollution in Arizona, so they were able to see it. And he said, I wanted to work in that frenzy of a father breaking into the bedroom in Close Encounters. I based that on my father busting into my bedroom saying, come on, let's look outside. And so it's amazing how he took a piece of real world, something that happened in his life, and he applied it into his film. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about Close Encounters of the Third Kind, is that it does really have a lot of human elements in it.
I think that's one of the reasons people liked it. They recognized the humanity in it. I mean, these were people who were, not famous and not particularly wealthy, didn't really have much going on. They had messy homes and everything. You could see that.
Just real people.
So yeah, it was definitely relatable people.
And he said he was impressed with the merchandising for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He couldn't believe that people were really buying all these things. Necklaces, keychains. I mean, he kind of got a glimpse of what the 70s was like. People wanted more, and it wasn't just the films, but it was the things that they came out of the films as well. And we know that this was just the beginning of what Steven Spielberg would do in the future.
This is Eternal Zan, founder of the Cult of Marriott Carpet. If you'd like to join us, check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/Cult of Marriott Carpet, all one word. In the meantime, stay tuned for more exciting info on StarPodLog.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome myself and my cohort, my unindicted co-conspirator from the American Sci-Fi Classics track at DragonCon are super excited to be here. Let's introduce ourselves. I'm Gary Mitchel, and
I'm Joe Crowe.
You're right. Wait. That?
I think we got that backwards.
We did get that backwards. I'm Gary Kurtz.
And I'm Joe Mitchell.
Right.
Yeah,
Wait.
there we go.
That seems like there's something missing. We'll fix it in editing later.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen,
because right now we're doing it live.
Right now we are doing it live. That is the only way to do it. We are the co-directors of the American Sci-Fi Classics track at DragonCon. And in addition to doing awesome stuff at DragonCon on Labor Day weekend, we are doing live video panels every Thursday night on the YouTubes and the Facebooks at just Google American Sci-Fi Classics. But we're here right now tonight to talk about an awesome issue of Starlog magazine. Well, one article. The year was this? Was this like a fall preview?
It was the special fall TV issue of October 1978.
Okay, so I was but a mere youth of 8 years old when this officially came out.
Mm-hmm. I was 7, about to become 8.
Uh-huh. So let's start with the end of the article, because this is just a little 6-page article. There are a crazy amount of sci-fi classic awesomeness things in this article. But let's start at the end and we'll work our way backwards to the main events. Project UFO.
Yes.
A
Jack Webb.
What do you remember about the show?
I remember liking it as a kid because it was trying to do, a realistic take on the hunt. It wasn't like Project Blue Book, or was it? It was. Now I may be confusing because there was Project Blue Book, but I think that I can't remember if Project Blue Book was part of UFO or if Project Blue Book was a whole separate series. I should do some research.
Oh, that's not our thing, Gary.
No, it is not. But, it's from Jack Webb, Just the Facts, Ma'am, Dragnet. So it's definitely got that. I remember it having that matter of fact, these 2 Air Force guys going out, talking to people, getting their stories of encounters with UFOs, and, the whole, did it really happen?
Exactly. What I remember of it, it was kind of like a Scooby-Doo situation where it would turn out it was not UFOs. I could be mistaken. Mm-hmm. But I do remember these 2 dudes were just in their military suits. One of them was Colonel Flagg from MASH.
Yes.
And it was weird seeing him as the hero because he's kind of a jerk on MASH anyway. But I remember digging this show, and in retrospect, looking way back at it now, this was kind of a prototype for X-Files.
Yeah, very much so. And like the article points out, which I just reread the article again, and it was the Project Blue Book did come from here. It was, people talk about, because the other guy was from Adam 12, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah.
But, Dragnet was very much, Webb would go find these crime stories, and he wanted it as dry and direct as possible. Just the facts was a catchphrase for a reason. And this was pretty much, Dragnet UFO.
Yeah.
Dragnet flying saucer. So it was all very dry, very direct. There were some hints always that, there might actually be something. But like you said, 9 times out of 10, they went with the Scooby-Doo ending of, it was just swamp gas.
Oh, that was what I was going to say. How many episodes ended with swamp gas? I wonder.
Mm-hmm. But UFOs were hot.
Yeah, I remember digging it, but I don't remember watching really more than 1 or 2 episodes of it. I don't think it lasted super long, though.
I think it only went like a season, and I remember I liked it. I know my mom liked it. Chariots of the Gods was all a big thing.
Oh, yeah.
And like you said, it's very much a prototype X-Files meets Kolchak kind of thing. But I remember as a kid, as a 7-8-year-old kid, I dug it.
Yeah. And I'm sure. We're it's 2021 now. I'm sure you can find the show. It may have had an official release at some point, but I'm sure look on the YouTubes. I'm sure it's out there somewhere.
Yeah, and so mind you, I'm looking at this through the nostalgia filter because I don't think I've watched it since it aired.
No, I don't think I have.
But if you're a fan of the 70s genre shows, the sci-fi ones, then this will probably be right up your alley. And if you're a fan of, Jack Webb's other works, then it's like right up your weirdly niched alley.
Exactly. Recommend it. recommended. Let's maybe that's what we'll do. Like as we're going through, we'll recommend you Google it and try to find it as we go through. And the next thing up is Brave New World. It was a 4-hour NBC novel for television.
Oh, remember when they used to do that all the time? A novel for television.
Oh yeah, I remember that. But I confess that I do not remember this.
Yeah, I'm of the same way. I mean, Brave New World is a titan of sci-fi literature. It's one of the ones everybody likes to talk about. And there was that recent TV series on, I think, Apple. Jessa just watched it, actually.
Oh, okay.
And she liked it. I watched the first episode. But, yeah, I am looking at the
review ends.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm looking at the picture, I'm looking at the cast list, and I read the article, and I'm like, I have no memory of this.
Now, it
I
had
felt like Gandalf in Lord Fellowship of the Ring. I have no memory of this place.
I have. Yeah, now, it has top-notch people in it. Keir Dullea, who we met at Dragon Con. He was in 2001: A Space Odyssey with your namesake, Gary Mitchel.
Yep, Gary Lockwood.
And so he was a character in this, and so was Bud Cort, famous to me from Arrested Development, where he was the judge on Bud Cort. Let's see, Ron O'Neill, I believe he played Superfly.
Yes.
And Marcia Strassman, who was I believe she was Bob Newhart's wife on the first Bob Newhart show, maybe?
Probably.
I believe that is, if she wasn't that, and I'm, again, boy, maybe research is a thing that, I don't know. I'm not going to do it. But I feel like if you Google her name, you're going to remember 10 things that she's been in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. She's one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's fun about reading the article for me is, you know, it's like 1978 is for many years ago, and it's all the same thing that we hear today of any adaptation of a book of, I respect the book enormously. The book is the star. And it's like, yeah, no. That has not changed.
We have heard that so many times, you and I have, and we've heard it in interviews coming out of the mouths of people who have made, like, they were in the room same room as us, saying that same thing. And sometimes I don't know if my eyes could roll back in my head any further, but
yeah. And my other favorite bit out of the article is we've updated the Huxley in 2 ways. First, babies no longer come out of baubles, they come out of bags. Ooh, big change there, lady.
Good
Way
job.
to step out and take a risk.
Let's really go out on a limb with this thing. Let's really kick this one up a notch.
Yeah. And then the other would be, second, we've come up with a language like, quote, kids will like, unquote.
What?
So, and that's another thing that's a change. We're getting, hey, fellow kids.
Oh, yeah.
We're hip.
These are the prototypical old TV writers, I'm guessing, with their white short sleeve button up shirts rolled up with the cigarette about to down to its last ash, and they're still typing away at 3 a.m. I got
play with pogs, right?
Hey Frank, let's put them in bags instead of bottles.
So I'm sure it's available somewhere. But
I'm sure. And, book fans, like you said, there is a more recent version of this thing, and hopefully it's good. I don't think Superfly is in it, so already I'm...
Nope. It has the Young Han Solo guy and the guy who was in Game of Thrones as Dany's brother who gets his head melted with the gold.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Still not Superfly.
Nope, not Superfly.
Or Judge Bud Cort.
True.
But Well, let's keep her moving. Let's go to. Now we're talking. Now we're getting somewhere. Do you remember the live action Mandrake the Magician?
I actually do not. But
Well,
I remember what I read and loved the comic strip as a kid.
Oh yeah.
And I loved him when he was on Defenders of the Earth cartoon.
That's where I was going with this. But yeah, very. And I think probably anybody who worked on Doctor Strange back in the day would admit, oh yeah, there's Mandrake is part of the building blocks of Doctor Strange. But I feel like I do remember this. I could be wrong, but I was 8. I watched everything that came on television, and this was their attempt.
Yeah. Well, and also in 1978, it was easier to watch everything because there was only 3 channels. So.
Yeah, and if you were like me, really, you could only really pick up 2 of them because we didn't really get CBS until we got cable, which was well into many years later. But this one has whereas Mandrake the Magician is a comic strip character. He's owned by King Features, so he was, and of course, like you said, Defenders of the Earth, he's in the same universe as the Phantom and Flash Gordon.
Right.
But
that other guy that they invented for the show, whose name I was forgetting. But
this TV movie was just he's a detective who does magic, which is that's what he was in the comic strip too. But I do like that one of the characters in the cast list here, his name is Alec Gordon, a combo of creator Alex Raymond and, of course, Mr. Flash Gordon. But apparently Robert Reed, Mr. Brady himself was in this.
Yeah, Robert Reed and they actually got some real magician cred. They got Harry Blackstone Jr. Oh,
why didn't he play Mandrake?
Yeah, maybe he couldn't act. I don't know.
Then they wouldn't have had to do stunts. He could have just done I'm sure Harry Blackstone, of course, an actual sorcerer. Come on.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the fun thing about this reading the article is, everything was almost everything was like a detective show or a cop show. And they were always trying to find a new spin on it. With the Rockford Files, he was broke and not very good at it.
So I'm guessing
Mandrake, having that edge of, he's also a magician.
Yeah, it says, let's see, Mandrake needs all the spectacular magic he can muster when a man dies mysteriously during his Las Vegas performance. So every episode, does somebody almost die at one of his shows? That's a very Murder, She Wrote kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like maybe
now that's an episode of Murder She Wrote I want.
Actually, yeah. Like, hey, maybe Mandrake has something to do with all this. But no, let's see, Anthony Herrera, whose name is familiar to me, so he's been in things. But yeah, it just says he just does detective stuff. But they updated Lothar, the sidekick.
Yes. Oh, that was the guy on Defenders of the Earth. He was the other guy.
Okay, so yeah. Not made up for Defenders of the Earth. Well, they did
They changed him a bit.
They gave him something. What the heck happened to my voice? It's Lothar.
It's the curse of Mandrake.
The curse of Mandrake has gotten my voice. This is great. Okay, I think I'm okay. But yeah, I remember. I think there was just this movie. I don't think there was anything more than that. I feel like I saw it. I think I may have gotten the VHS tape at a convention years later.
Yeah. My other favorite bit from the article is talking about the bad guy who is, 1978. He's demanding $10 million or he'll systematically explode everything that one character ever owned, including a nuclear reactor. And then they follow that with, we're trying to maintain the fun of it.
That's great. But yeah, I would say give this one a look. I would say look for this one. I think it's probably cheesy 70s. And I say cheesy with the utmost of respect because cheese is good for you.
Absolutely. It's
But
part of his
now
healthy diet.
Yeah. Now let's go to the next page, and now we're getting into the 5-star good stuff that I think maybe lots more people will remember, starting with the Godzilla cartoon.
Yes. Up from the depths, 40 stories high, breathing fire.
It's high in the sky,
Godzilla.
And
Godzuki. And that's the part as a kid I was like, I gotta tune out for a minute.
Freaking Godzuki. And, you know,
the original Scrappy Doo.
Yes. 100%. And in fact, we'll get to the second Scrappy Doo in just a minute on the same network, NBC, the same year. But I super was into the Godzilla cartoon, man. I had the Godzilla with the tongue that would flick out. The Shogun Warrior Godzilla.
Yes, I love that toy.
And did sidebar, Funko, the reaction people, they're putting out a new version of that Godzilla.
I saw It Will Be Mine.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because the tongue on my guy broke off almost immediately. But no, this cartoon was, they figured out an ingenious way to use Godzilla, and by that I mean hardly ever.
Right. Well, it was like the Incredible Hulk. You would show, we're all here just waiting for Godzilla. We're all here just waiting for the Hulk. They show up at the one moment, and you go, yes, he's finally here, and they do the thing, and then he goes away.
Yeah. But they've added,
and the rest of the time it was, either Bill Bixby running around being beaten up by bullies, or it was this crew on the boat running into a monster going, how can we defeat it? Call Godzilla. No, it's not dangerous enough.
And they had a beeper, didn't they, to call Godzilla, and he was always sleeping. So I'm like, man, he's gonna be grumpy when you're waking the poor king of the monsters up from sleep to come handle your business, and they would always, I would say maybe not always, it was like a Star Trek communicator issue. They would always lose the beeper.
Yes. We should call if we're Godzilla for help. Where's the beeper? Oh no, Godzuki did something stupid to it again.
But somehow they managed to, did he have fire breath?
He did have fire breath. He didn't have atomic breath. He had fire breath. Because, Saturday morning.
Now, he didn't, set things on fire or anything.
Well, no, he just breathed the fire and the bad guys
I feel like he had heat vision too, didn't he? Maybe not.
Maybe? I don't know.
Godzuki could blow smoke bubbles.
Yes.
But that was probably...
Well, because he's little baby Godzilla.
And maybe he had like a 2-pack a day camel habit.
How do we keep Godzuki around? We just keep giving him boxes of camels.
But this is... I love looking back at old magazines like this because in one of the first paragraphs... something I did not know about the Godzilla cartoon. It says that they showed... it says Dave Stevens, and I wonder if that's the Rocketeer from comic books, Dave Stevens. It might not be. It could be. It might not be. But anywho, he says that the fellow who owns the rights to Godzilla said that Godzilla's... when he showed him the designs for the Godzilla cartoon character... he said that he doesn't look enough like an ape. And my thought was, because he's a lizard.
Right.
Or a dinosaur. But apparently that was not the issue, not an issue. But
well,
he says, go ahead.
Correct me if I'm wrong, isn't Godzilla or Gojira like gorilla whale?
You know what? Now that you say that, that sounds familiar. I think maybe, yeah. Okay.
Everybody's screaming at the comments as you're listening to this podcast. Please send your hate mail to hatemail@whatthecast.
JoeBcrow@gmail.com. If you wait, did I just give out my actual email address?
I think you did. Well, you gave out your actual real phone number in the Facebook group, so
I've done that as well. But anyway, it says that we ended up altering him so that he had flared nostrils and a blunt nose, a blunt snout, and I see it now.
Mm-hmm.
And but he looked very similar to the movie Godzilla to me.
Mm-hmm.
I accept this as Godzilla canon.
Absolutely. And my favorite, still sticking with the article, my favorite bit is like none of the monsters he fights are the ones you've seen in the films. Thankfully, there's no smog monster, but they got a few mythological creatures in there. And this is my favorite quote here. There's another episode where he fights himself. I don't know where they came up with that. Like, really, dude? You're running the show and you don't know where. Okay.
Where were you when they were writing everything? I don't know where they has he not heard of Godzilla or science fiction before?
Yeah.
But now that I think I remember that episode because there was like a mirror and Godzilla was pounding on the mirror trying to get to the other Godzilla.
Yeah.
Maybe.
The one that always stuck with me that I thought was clever is, and this was an ingenious idea for saving money, he fought an invisible monster. Which means they didn't have to animate it. But at the end, they're like, how is Godzilla going to fight a monster he can't see? And they had the helicopter fly over the monster and dump buckets of paint on it.
Yes.
So then Godzilla could see it. And
I totally remember that.
And I always thought, oh, that's a clever way to get around invisibility. But again, and then as an adult, I go, oh, that's a clever way to not spend money.
Now let's go to the next thing. And already we're running way low on time, but I could spend, and I think you could as well, spend a very long time on our next topic, the Fantastic Four cartoon from 1978.
Yes. I love the Human Torch. Oh, wait.
It's wild to me that his replacement, Herbie, people still remember but he doesn't have the same level of animosity that Scrappy Doo had.
No.
But they worked him into the comics later. He was on the Superhero Squad TV show on Disney Plus now. And there's a Funko Pop of Herbie.
Yes.
Which is bizarre because it was one character in one thing almost 50 years ago.
Yeah. I remember I almost bought there was the Marvel Legends Sue Storm figure where the Sue Storm figure didn't look that great. She had a few translucent pieces, but she came with a Herbie, and I almost bought it just to get that damn Herbie.
Well, confession time, I did buy that.
I am not surprised.
I know. I've got Herbie in my action figure box right here. I'm looking at the box. Herbie's in there somewhere.
Okay. But I love the fact that Stan Lee, they're interviewing Stan, who was pitching everything at the time. He wanted every Marvel thing.
Doing it.
And they just kept calling him Lee. Lee went on to explain this. Lee went on to do that. It's like, it's Stan Lee. Come on. Give him his name back.
But this guy, but the fact that he got this on television was an amazing thing for one thing. But the series itself, not bad.
No.
I didn't know at the time that I guess I had not gotten into my uncle's Marvel comics at the time. I was just a DC kid at the time, and because my uncle was a DC guy, and his Marvels were buried under the stack. Well, I had to get to the bottom of the stack to get to the Marvels. Mm-hmm. But once I started reading Fantastic Four, I recognized that this series adapted the actual comic stories, some of them.
Yeah.
So
the article says the storyboards are all being done by Jack Kirby, so it doesn't get much more legit than that.
You really can't. And I believe Ted Cassidy did the voice of the thing, Lurch from the Addams Family.
Yep.
But the little bit of trivia that comes from this article is that they made a cute little robot, they say, and they call him Charlie.
Yes.
So at the time of this article, he did not even have a name yet.
Yep, because they'd sold off, because this is what Marvel did at the time. They'd sold off all the rights to the individual characters to different studios. And so the Human Torch was sold off to Universal, so they couldn't use him. So as Lee puts it himself, quote, in order to justify calling them the Fantastic Four, we simply created a cute little robot. So there's got to be 4 of them to call them the Fantastic Four.
That makes sense. That makes good sense. And here's what gets me. He says, let's see, the Human Torch was, of course, the rumor that we all heard for many years was they were afraid children would catch themselves on fire.
Right. Like all those kids who jumped off buildings trying to be Superman.
Yeah.
Kids were dumb.
Yes.
In the 70s.
We were dumb in the 70s because I jumped off many a roof.
Yes. And it didn't hurt you none.
Yeah. I was a big fan of the Flying Nun.
Yes.
But it says here that the Spidey, Hulk, Captain America, and Ms. Marvel were sold off. Now, we know Hulk ended up happening. Spider-Man got his own live-action series. Captain America got 2
movies.
Movies, yes, thank you. I was looking for an adjective, and I don't need one. And Ms. Marvel. So they were trying to do, or intending to do, a Ms. Marvel thing in the 70s.
Yeah.
Which would have been...
Take that, fanboys.
Yeah. And now, today, we're only a couple of years away from them actually finally getting it done. So that's wild. So let's keep going. Anyway, as we were saying, Godzilla and this FF cartoon, they're on the interwebs somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
The FF cartoon is not on Disney Plus, though.
Which
Probably,
I'm sure it'll be there at some point. I mean,
hopefully.
It has to.
It's worth looking for. Now we're getting into the solid gold stuff.
Oh,
the original Battlestar Galactica.
Ah. The sounds of Cylons.
Yeah. This is so worth watching. If you grew up when we did on this show, or if you grew up 20 years later watching the new one with Edward James Olmos, both viable, worthwhile watches. Of course, the newer one, pretty serious and bleak and very science fictional, but also really good.
Yes.
But this one, going back to 1978, the imagination in all of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, again, like we mentioned earlier with the Project UFO, the UFOs, the Chariots of the Gods, just went through a huge popularity boom in the mid to late 70s. Everybody, ancient astronauts, and the idea is that, aliens came and built the pyramids, which is why Battlestar Galactica has a lot of those Egyptian touches.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't make that connection at the time, but the design of the Cylons is one of my favorite things.
Oh yeah, they were awesomely cool, and with the boom 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 boom, and that the electronic buy or command, the way they talked. I mean, it was like catnip for me as a kid. It's like they were terrifyingly awesome bad guys.
My biggest memory of Battlestar Galactica was there was a contest in our local newspaper where you won something. I remember now. You won a gold Cylon.
Yeah, the commander.
And all you had to do was identify they didn't call it you won the Cylon, because the contest itself was name the robots on Battlestar Galactica. And I wrote Cylon, clipped it out of my paper and mailed it in. The next week, at the laundromat with my grandma and my Aunt Naomi, got the paper, looked in it. I was not a winner because they said the name of the robot is Cyclone.
Oh, no.
Yep. But look.
I'd send them a very angry letter now.
Do I seem bitter 40-something years later?
just maybe a smidge.
Maybe a smidge.
That'd be like it'd be like the name the robot Dave. His name's Dave.
Sure, that's close enough.
Yeah, that's Dave the Cylon.
So somebody out there got it wrong and got that gold Cylon.
And they're out there with your gold Cylon to this day.
Yeah. But Battlestar Galactica, in fact, it's streaming right now on. In fact, I watched it just like a week or two ago, so it's easily findable. And
oh yeah.
And over the years, if you've sadly, of course, he passed away several years ago. But over the years, if you've been at any conventions, you've seen or run into Richard Hatch, who
especially Dragon Con, he was practically a mascot.
Yes, and he absolutely loved this show and kept it alive until its return, and he had a role in the new one.
Yeah,
he wrote novels.
And I love the fact that it was just it was supposed to be a one-off stunt casting thing, and he ended up becoming one of the most compelling characters on the show.
Yeah, but no, the Richard Hatch was just one of, and he's terrific on the show. Mm-hmm. But the whole cast, Jane Seymour was in, and of course, Paul Cartwright.
Oh yeah,
genius.
Yes. And we cannot not mention Starbuck, Dirk Benedict, who he was the epitome of cool when I was a kid. When me and my friends would play with our Battlestar Galactica ships, everybody fought over who was going to get to be Starbuck, and the leftovers had to pick like Apollo and Boomer. No, nothing against Apollo or Boomer, great characters, but Starbuck was the guy. He had the cigar, he had the attitude.
Your little brother had to play Daggett.
Yes.
Freaking Boxy.
Yeah, nobody liked Boxy.
Another
Scrappy.
Yeah. But
and the article itself, it's very bare bones. It's like 2 paragraphs and a bunch of pictures, but it's like, oh yeah, because they're still early in pre-production. I think they say here they've only filmed like the first 3.
Yeah. And they probably were not. They were probably thinking, I bet we're not going to make many more than this.
Yeah.
They ended up making a fair amount.
It went 2 seasons or one really long season. The budget is what killed it. It was like in modern day dollars, it was something like $1 million an episode now, which at the time was like, yeah, we can make 6 shows for this.
Yeah. And, of course it ended with Galactica 1980, which,
the less said, the better.
Yeah. But yeah, I think
my favorite part of the article though is that picture of Adama in front of the board doing what the hell is this? That's the look on his face. And he's gesturing like, what the hell is this?
Like whose job was this? Frank, did you do this?
Little Joe, come here.
Exactly. Little Joe, clearly this is your fault. It's like somebody set the map on fire again. But I do like a caption up on top of the page. It says, intent on wiping out the human, quote, pest, Cylon Centurions have created an exotic, quote, fly trap in the form of a tourist casino, which is remarkably similar to a cantina on something else that was famous around this time. But top notch, seek out Battlestar Galactica if you haven't.
Indeed.
And lastly, well, no, actually, there's one before that, before our big main event, Nova.
Yes. As a science nerd, as a kid, Nova was, it was a must watch. getting my science, and because we were still kind of doing the space race.
Yeah, we thought it was something that was going to be an ongoing situation. After we got to the moon, we thought there was every intent that we were going to keep going back and doing tons of stuff. And it was a space and sci-fi and that kind of thing were very much in the cultural. They had a moment. They had a very long moment, I think. And of course, Star Wars certainly helped.
Oh,
but Nova, iconic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're talking here about the two particular episodes, One Small Step, which is a retrospect of the first 20 years, which was recent.
Yeah, at
the
that
first
time.
20 years of space program. And then the second one being, and I was looking right at it, and I just lost it. But yeah, the
Final Frontier.
Final Frontier. We're talking about further exploration of space, and just, God, we were so optimistic.
Yeah. Now, I remember, and I may be making this up, but I'm going to say it anyway. I remember being disappointed to find out this was just a PBS science show and not a show about Richard Rider from Marvel Comics with the human rocket. Bummed out. And he'll be in live action one day. And he'll probably fight the Cyclones. I'm still mad. But
instead of gold, he'll be ochre.
But now the big main event, Buck Rogers.
Yeah, and this is actually a really cool article because you can tell they're really just starting to put the idea together of what the show is going to be, and they're talking about what they're going to do with the property and how they're going to change it, and they're just gushing over Gary Larson in this. Yeah.
And one of my favorite things about this article is they have an illustration from William Stout, who you and I and a lot of Dragon Con and sci-fi fans everywhere have had chance to meet, because this dude is a frequent convention goer.
Yes.
And his stories are the best.
Yeah, if you ever have a chance to go to a panel where he's just telling stories or talking, go. He has some of the best stories. He tells them well. And if you don't know who he is, he designed the original Dragon Con logo. He was a production designer, I believe on Ghostbusters. He was definitely the main production designer for Return of the Living Dead. He worked on Conan. He worked on
Masters of the Universe.
Masters of the Universe is the big one. Well, at least for me. There's probably bigger. Conan technically would be bigger. But.
Sure. But no, he did so many things, and I know he's on the web, and I think there's a book of his art maybe has come out in the last few years. But the stories are just being like kind of sitting under the learning tree, listening to this guy, and he's just the coolest. It's like he drives into the panel room on a motorcycle. I don't think that's safe, and I don't think he's actually allowed to do that, but I bet he would if he could.
Yes.
But in addition to William Stout, the rest of the show is good too. I don't know if they ever used any of his artwork or designs for the actual series, but that first episode, I literally rewatched it a week ago.
Oh.
It's on the NBC app, and it's worth going and checking out because I didn't remember half of it.
Yeah. Well, I remember loving it as a kid and just, being all into it, and watching it as an adult now. It's so 70s. It's futuristic, but it's 70s. There's the disco sequence, the costuming. It could not be more 70s.
The unforgiving costume.
Yes.
And
Bill and Aaron have talked about how unforgiving those suits were, but she was one of my first crushes because of that white suit.
Oh, me too. And of course, the legendary Felix Sela as Tweaky.
Voiced by ML Blanc.
That's right. That's right. Now, everybody, this was a show that I watched chapter and verse, start to finish. There was the Jack Palance episode.
Oh, yes. Jack, if you pay me, I'll show up, Palance.
Yeah. But everything about this show, very clearly, Gil Gerard took his performance from Han Solo.
Oh, yeah.
Which, again, not a complaint. Both
That's
great.
A good thing.
Yeah. But the look of the show, the designs, the spaceship effects, all tremendous.
And even when they did the complete redesign of the show for the second season to try to keep the ratings going, and they brought in Hawk, it still worked for me as a kid because that Hawk guy was awesome.
He looked cool.
Yes.
He was a Hawk man. And I thought, well, this must be the coolest person I've ever seen on television. And the show is well worth rewatching. But like you said, the nostalgia factor, sure, but if you've never seen it, you don't have that. So go ahead and give it a shot.
Yeah, give it a shot. And the article is fun. It really gives, it's definitely let's be honest, the whole article, all of them are puff pieces, but it's a well-written puff piece. And it gives you, I mean, I would definitely seek this out, read it, especially if you're a fan of the properties from back in the day. Go back and get a look and see what it was like, when it was new, before it had come out and people were excited about it.
Starlog magazine was the only thing we had at the time.
Yeah.
And it was the internet as far as we knew. I mean, that was where we got all of our information about everything. And all they had was what tidbits the studios would dribble down to them. So a lot of the stuff that they would report as news would never happen. I remember my big memory of Starlog is at the end of every month, they would have a list of all these sci-fi things that were in development. And I feel like in the early 80s, they said, coming next summer, Spider-Man, the motion picture. And well, that didn't happen.
not for a long time.
Not for if they had said coming in 20 years, I don't know how I would have felt about that. But good stuff. We at the American Sci-Fi Classics track all year round, not just during convention season. We talk about this stuff all the time. This it's not just a 70s thing, not just a nostalgia thing, and not just a childhood look back thing. I mean, this is quality. These are quality creations, and it's neat to go back into the archives, basically.
Yeah. It's fun to go back and look, and again, like I said, they're puff pieces, but they're well done puff pieces, and sometimes there's nothing wrong with a puff piece. Give me the teaser to let me watch this. Get me interested.
Yeah. Don't tell me everything that's going to happen. Give me a teaser. And I got to say, from reading this article in Starlog, I'm kind of excited about all these things that we've talked about tonight. I'm going to go look up Project UFO, and I may go and rewatch some Godzilla or some FF. I don't know that I'm going to go and look for Brave New World.
No. Yeah, if there's anything you're going to watch out of what we've said here, I would say Battlestar Galactica. If you're going to watch only one thing, if you're going to watch 2, watch that in Buck Rogers. If you're going to watch 3, then you're on your own.
Yeah. Just take your pick from what's left. If you want a robot to replace the Human Torch, then watch the FF cartoon.
Exactly.
Because he really does. It's a 1-for-1 replacement. He has
absolutely
behavior as Johnny Storm, and he irritates the Thing, to my recollection. But anywho, 1978 was a big year, apparently. And so seek all that stuff out and seek us out. Gary, tell them where they can find us.
They can find us on Facebook if they look in the groups, Facebook/groups/DragonCon American Sci-Fi Classics. You can find us on the YouTube by searching for American Sci-Fi Classics. You can find me on the Twitter as @Gary_Mitchel, Mitchell with one L. Yes, Star Trek fans, it's my real name. And you can find Joe as @Sci-Fi Classic Track on the Twitter. And join us every Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, on the Facebook or on the YouTube. We might even Twitch one day.
That's right. And if you happen to be in Atlanta on Labor Day weekend, we'll be in the basement at the Marriott.
Hi, I'm Al Milgram. You may remember me from a ton of work at Marvel, doing Captain Marvel, Spider-Man, the Avengers, the West Coast Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy. You name it, I worked on it. And, of course, Firestorm at DC. And when I want to hear more about comic books or related subjects, I always listen to StarPodLog.
Return of the Video Superheroes and Doctor Strange. We'd like to, at this time, introduce into this segment to join in the conversation Tony Barletta from the DragonCon comic book track. Welcome back to the show, Tony.
Hi, thank you for having me. Great to be back.
Hey, baby doll. Do you have fond memories of watching shows like Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, my parents actually watched both of those shows, so it's just amazing. They didn't really watch anything else of that genre. But, yeah, The Incredible Hulk was on for so many seasons, and so my parents actually did watch it week after week, and I thought that was pretty neat.
I mean, ever since I was a kid, I loved superheroes. I guess that's why I have such a massive comic book collection. I never grew out of it. It's just I just was always gravitated towards superheroes, and you know, before those primetime shows, I remember as a younger kid, you know, they had the Shazam and ISIS shows, and I'd get up at like crazy hours to watch, you know, like Superman reruns from the 60s. I couldn't get enough superhero shows. And, you know, I think the 70s are cool in that they started to, it's the first time you really saw them start to branch superheroes out into primetime for an all-audience kind of show.
Yeah, you know what I liked about The Incredible Hulk? That it was a continuing show, and you actually had compassion for the Incredible Hulk. Yeah, I'd like to see him bust things up and rip out of his shirt, but when I was a kid, I'd watch it on Friday nights. I remember watching it back-to-back with Dukes of Hazzard. But as an adult, you watch it, and it's such a compassionate story. You really feel for him.
Yeah, I mean, in keeping kind of with the comics, I mean, he's a hero, but at the same time, he's a tragic character. And Banner can never escape the tragedy of his own transformation. And I think Bill Bixby was just brilliant in that role. I mean, I can't recall anything else I've seen Bixby in myself, but other than that show. But he was just a brilliant actor in that show. He brought it to life. And of course, Lou Ferrigno is the Hulk. I mean, you know, we've seen great Hulks in CGI in modern day, but I mean, the best live action Hulk, of course, was Lou Ferrigno. He made you think. Yeah, he made you, and the way that the effects were for the day, I mean, it really made you think that Bixby became Ferrigno. It really looked like it.
The article actually says they were going for the King Kong experience, where it's a monster that you feel sorry for. And that was a great aspect of the show. I think that's something that's the reason my parents could enjoy it. It had that very human element.
Now, how about Wonder Woman? We were all fans of Wonder Woman. I mean, no matter how it was the 40s or the 70s, I liked both versions. And that's what this article talks about, is there's some big changes coming up for Wonder Woman. It wasn't going to be in the 1940s anymore. It was going to be a contemporary show in the 1970s setting.
Yeah, very true. Hulk was a contemporary show of its time in the 70s. Wonder Woman started right off the bat there in World War II, and did it successfully. And they decided to jump ahead to the 70s and put her and Steve Trevor in that head of that special government investigative office there that always had her investigating new crises every week there, and the little robot that was talking to them too. Remember that little robot?
And I liked it both ways. But when they put it in the 70s, they had much more colorful villains, and so that was fun to watch.
Yeah, I liked it better in the 70s as well. I think it was more relatable.
The disco and the woman with the spiders and all of that. It was just fun, campy stuff. They didn't really try to make that show as human. It was all just it's like they knew they were doing a comic book show, and that's all they wanted to be, really. But it was just great for the time. I love how Wonder Woman was just so glamorous and always did the right thing.
No doubt about it. But the producers were worried. The article says Wonder Woman once again was going up against its nemesis, the Donnie and Marie show. And
that totally explains why growing up in the 70s I never saw Donnie and Marie. I didn't realize it, but I was always watching Wonder Woman.
Yeah, and I hated that too, because if they weren't on at the same time, I would have watched both shows. But I think I did watch Donnie and Marie at some point, but like whenever it wasn't on at the same time as Wonder Woman.
Yeah, I liked a lot of those 70s variety shows, whether it be Sonny and Cher. There were a bunch of them. Do you remember? It seemed like there were tons of those type of shows on there. Now, this is something a lot of people forget about. I think that there were just problems with distribution, but there was a live-action Spider-Man show. I remember watching it with my brother. He had bracelets on, and he'd shoot rope out of the bracelets. I mean, I liked it because it was Spider-Man, but it was kind of weird in the same way.
I have a hard time trying to figure out when I watched it. Reading the article, I didn't realize it was actually a primetime television show. I remember as a kid watching, I might have caught one or two, but I think they were spaced so far apart.
It seems like that show was only on one season. And I did watch it. I just kind of, I don't think I really got into that one, but I watched it and I just said, okay, I mean, it's okay.
Because I was a big fan of Shazam and Isis, the Saturday morning ones. They had Isis guest starred on Spider-Man. I think her name was Joanna Cameron, if I'm remembering that correctly. And she actually was a main character on one of the episodes that interacted with Peter there.
So you're saying the actress, not the character?
Yes, the actress that played Isis was guest starring. Yeah. It was a great. It was cool at the time because it's like, hey, look, there's the actress from Isis. There she is on Spider-Man. I mean, it wasn't a crossover, but it was sort of a crossover.
You know what I know was more memorable for me was Spider-Man on the Electric Company.
Oh, yeah, I loved that. Now, remember that he didn't talk on that.
Also, there's an article about a new show coming up, a TV movie, Doctor Strange.
I didn't see that. That was a TV movie?
I remember the reason why I watched it was because my dad was a comic book fan. Anything that was out in the 50s and 60s he knew about. And he said, oh, boys, Doctor Strange is going to be on. We got to watch this. And so I watched it because of my dad's prompting. And it was one of those things that I was kind of scared as a little kid watching it. It was kind of creepy. The outfit was kind of like the outfit that was in the comic books. But you know how they did with shows of that time? They never made the outfits really look like the comic book outfit. They kind of modernized it and kind of trimmed it down a bit so it looked a little bit more realistic. But for the time, I enjoyed it.
I don't remember. I didn't come across it when it first came out for whatever reason. And looking back on it, just like you said, I don't think I knew anything about Doctor Strange at that time in my life. I was buying a lot of comics as a kid just because they were cheap. It was fun entertainment. You go to the newsstands, but I knew pretty much most DC and Marvel heroes, but I didn't know anything about Doctor Strange. I had no idea he existed when it came out. And then years later, I heard about it, and I thought, oh, that's cool. They made a Doctor Strange show I'd never seen, and then I did find a rebroadcast of it, so I came across it many years later. They did a pretty decent job. It's what you'd pretty much expect for Doctor Strange for the limits of a 70s TV show budget.
I mean, when I look at these shows now, the fondest memories that I have are playing with my Mego dolls while watching the shows. Like I had the Mego doll of the Incredible Hulk. I had to have my doll when I watched the Incredible Hulk. When any of these shows came out and I had a doll of it, which we had a lot of Mego dolls because Mego was just king of the 70s when it came to toys. That's the joy of it. Yeah, out of these shows, though, I'd say my top ones were both the Incredible Hulk and Wonder Woman.
Yeah, back then I watched both of them, and I thought they were great. And the thing, Wonder Woman, I mean, that one I was really sad when it got canceled.
I think looking at the Wonder Woman show, how they embraced the 70s. When you watch it now, I can almost I can see how it was a precursor to a few years after that, the Buck Rogers TV series. It felt some of the tone of it's bringing, I think it led to other things and not just Wonder Woman in a good way. Linda Carter was the perfect actress for that role. And I mean, seeing her flying in an invisible plane, I mean, how cool was that, I remember fascinated about that as a kid. And just, I wanted to fly in on an invisible plane. Because, I'm a kid, so why not?
Hello, this is Paul Mounthieu reporting as usual from the UK and reporting specifically in this issue on Gerry Anderson's Space Report. This is an interesting feature, as we mentioned in the previous instalment. Gerry Anderson's profile had increased somewhat in the United States thanks to the cult appeal of Space 1999, and for a while he was given his own column in Starlog magazine. It was called Space Report, edited by David Hirsch, and in this particular edition of the column, Gerry is writing across 2 pages about part of his history which I had totally forgotten about and will be very interested to see again. So I shall be scuttling to YouTube as soon as I finish recording to see if I can find Alien Attack. This was a production that Gerry put together in 1977, advertising Jif dessert topping in the UK. A very popular sweet topping, which was obviously available. I don't really remember it, but I do remember the advert Alien Attack, which required Gerry to recreate the supermarionation extravaganzas of the 1960s. And as he reports in the Space Report article, this actually went back, and it's always amazing to read and fascinating to read these historical pieces, which are in the context of something which at the time was contemporary, but now, of course, is something which goes back 40-odd years. Gerry reports, and this is, as I say, is dated January 1978. A little over a year ago, I received a call from Judy Hurst of Collett Dickinson Pearson Partners Limited, one of the biggest advertising agencies in London, with reel upon reel of award-winning commercials. Miss Hurst wanted us to make a commercial using the supermarionation technique developed many years ago for Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet. The technique hadn't been used for many years in this country for the purpose of product commercials. And again, this is 1978, and Gerry's really talking about the previous decade. It often dazzles me, the passage of time and reading things written 50 years ago, and people talking about things which are fresh in their memory, really, or part of their recent history. He goes on to say that within hours I was studying their proposed script. I was aware the commercial would be expensive, for it would mean creating new, highly sophisticated supermarionation puppets and highly complicated mechanics to go with the puppets. When I quoted the estimated budget, it sounded more like Starlog's overseas phone number. A rare bit of humour there for Mr. Anderson. However, CDP consists of very experienced people, and if they believe an idea will sell their client's product, they can be very determined. The interesting point here is where he says that he sent Miss Hurst a videotape of the pilot for Thunderbirds made in 1964. Again, this was just 14 years ago. It really did my heart good when they called to say that the whole agency had seen the Thunderbirds film and had loved it. Whatever dating had taken place had given it a certain amount of charm. Of course, now in 2021, we know that Thunderbirds still has that charm. It still doesn't seem particularly dated. I watched an episode not that long ago, and I was struck by how contemporary it felt in terms of its pace, its script, the effects, of course, still look astonishing, even in these days of CGI and sophisticated computer technology effects. Thunderbirds, I think, is one of those shows that, will never date if you look at it in the right way. And it's incredible to think that in 1978 he was resurrecting techniques which he'd been using a decade or so before. He goes on then in the article to say how he put together a team to make this commercial. And again, it's just fascinating, the names that come back in this article who were working on this particular production. Normally the agency creates the storyboard, but in this particular case, however, we were dealing with a specialised technique, and the agency felt my staff and I would know more about the layout of this type of commercial than they would. It was produced by Reg Hill, of course, who's a name that Anderson fans will be familiar with from so many of his shows. David Lane, who directed many Anderson shows and wrote many of them, of course, he also directed the sets. Reg Hill designed the set, and John Brown, one of the puppeteers from the old days, came back and joined us with his wife Wanda, who was at that time also an expert puppeteer. And he goes on to say that they'd pretty much forgotten the techniques of filming in puppets. Of course, we all know that Gerry wasn't a fan of his puppet work, and he did it in sufferance. But as they made this commercial alien attack, they'd forgotten how hard it was to actually get the perspectives right and the right camera angles in which to get the best picture quality and so on. But all those techniques seemed to come back fairly quickly. They sort of went back and found the old magic again. And interesting to see that they cast 3 actors to record the dialogue for the puppets, and the 3 characters, basically, the man, the woman, and the professor. The man was played by, good old Ed Bishop, an Anderson favourite and one of my favourites from his role as Commander Straker in the classic UFO. The woman played by Angela Richards, and the professor by David Tate. It was all shot at EMI Studios in Boreham Wood over 2 days. Special effects featuring a fleet of flying dishes and a space battle were shot at Bray Studios in the capable hands, of course, the legendary Brian Johnson and Nick Alder. This is an interesting feature here. He goes on to say that once it was all shot, he had the sets and the puppets shipped to Blackpool in England, where at the time they had a very extensive Gerry Anderson Space City exhibition. Now, I have very vague memories of seeing this exhibition. I can't really remember what was there now, but I'm imagining that there were classic props and sets and all sorts of things from the classic Anderson shows. Of course, Gerry was famous for just throwing out the props and things from his shows because he didn't think they were of any value, but clearly a lot of them had been rescued and were put on display or possibly replicas. But he goes on to say that one fateful day there was a cloudburst which caused thousands of people to fight for cover, many entering the exhibition. It may not be the best way to attract clients, but nevertheless the exhibition was packed and some of the young people were carrying knapsacks. The attendants were unable to move freely. When the crowd thinned out, the puppets of the professor and the woman had disappeared from the showcase. That's very sad. And yeah, it's very depressing that people felt the need to pinch these things, to steal these artifacts. Presumably they're long gone now, but you wonder why, where they went, and what their ultimate fate was, or whether they're still lurking somewhere. But it's a shame that, people have to help themselves to things that aren't theirs, particularly when they're things that have obviously made with a huge amount of attention and detail for professional purposes, and people just pinch them and take them away. Well, it's human nature, I suppose. He goes on to say then the film was cut together, everything worked, and we were soon in the dubbing theatre with the nostalgia of Barry Gray's old Thunderbirds music. Just within our deadline, the film was completed. Then we had to find a feature film which would be good to screen with our commercial. In England, commercials are shown in movie theatres between feature presentations. Yes, who knew? Fortunately, a picture called Star Wars had just arrived in England, so they went on release together in December 1977. We were delighted to see throughout the United Kingdom hundreds of thousands of people standing in long lines waiting to see our commercial. That's right, Gerry. That's exactly what they were waiting for. I'm delighted to report that Alien Attack played its part in maintaining the already popular Jif dessert topping in its market position of number 1. The whole experience reminded me of the magic of super marination and set me thinking that it's about time we had another Thunderbirds type series. Yeah, interesting. I suppose we could wonder if that commercial laid the seeds for what eventually became Terrorhawks a few years later. Another interesting space report from Gerry then reminded me of something which I had totally forgotten about. I do remember the alien attack advertisement because it was shown on television. And as I said, I will be scurrying off to YouTube to take a look at it now.
The Joker, holy cow!
It's Batman, sold separately, and the Wayne Foundation, a crime-fighting lab. Assembly required. The top floor is Batman's penthouse.
Bring it down!
The elevator takes Batman past the computer station, down to the communications center. There's a Batman trophy room, working elevator, and a bookcase with secret hiding compartment.
Where'd he go? That's the secret.
Batman's Wayne Foundation comes with all accessories shown. Batman figure sold separately by Mego.
Starlog Magazine, issue number 18, December 1978. Log entries, news from the worlds of science fiction and fact.
Science fiction. Endangered species? $1 can help save the original Creature from the Black Lagoon, Mr. Spock's ears, the first stop-motion model ever built by Ray Harryhausen, the first ever animated dinosaurs from the silent Lost World, a Martian death machine from The War of the Worlds, Earth vs. the Flying Saucers, UFO models, the original manuscript from A.E. Van Vogt's classic novel Slan, 5 of Dr. Lau's 7 Faces, monsters from TV's Outer Limits, The Thing's right arm, masks from The Mole People and Planet of the Apes, rare paintings by Ray Bradbury and Robert Bloch, and original artwork by Frank R., Hans Bach, and Virgil Finlay.
So this article talks about super collector Forrest J. Ackerman. He's asking that people donate $1 to keep this collection going. I mean, you got to figure this was a super fan. His mansion was just filled with everything that you could possibly think of from the worlds of science fiction, fantasy, and horror of that day and earlier. And so he allowed people to come into his house and tour the Acker Mansion and look at all these items because he felt that it was necessary to preserve them.
And that is so cool that he wanted to keep these things because, I mean, it's like he knew later on people would really value these. Like, oh, wow, look at that. Like, they actually kept that because a lot of stuff from old movies isn't still around today.
That's right. And so a lot of people did respond to this, and they enjoyed going to his house, and he was able to maintain the collection because of the generosity. Think about it, $1, sending that in to preserve these artifacts, it was $1 well spent.
Greetings, StarPodLog. This is Matt Porter from Planet Kiss Room, jamming on guitar and jamming your frequencies to talk about Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. Saturday, October 28th, 1978, I was 10 years old and totally into Kiss and Star Wars and comic books and monster movies and pretty much the exact same as I am now. So, of course, the broadcast of Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park was a huge event. And I remember having a blast watching with my brothers and my sister. It was great fun. It was filled with Kiss music and action and even the classic Universal monsters battling Kiss in the Chamber of Thrills. So what's not to love? I mean, of course, the ending didn't make a lot of sense, but we all felt good knowing that Kiss had triumphed and everyone could rock and roll all night. I've watched the movie dozens of times over the years, and I can always enjoy it. Is it cheesy? Of course it is. Is it perfect? You call some baboon doing the herky-jerky perfection? Lay off, man. But of course, it is fun. Absolutely fun. The Kiss Army makes our fun the way we want to, man. Get it? It's always fun to hang out with Sam and Melissa and Kiss, and I still enjoy watching Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park 40 years later.
U.S. invaded by Doctor Who. You might not recognize the name, but Doctor Who is a legend in his own time. For 15 years, a British TV institution and an unqualified success in 30 foreign countries, he is still relatively unknown in the United States. Although the PBS stations ran some of his older exploits in 1975, very few Americans know of his fame. WOR-TV, Channel 9 in New York, and other affiliated stations hope to remedy that situation this fall. On October 7th at 6:30 p.m., a brand new Doctor Who will premiere, bringing with him the strange associates, weird new worlds, and incredible monsters that have made famous his half-hour serialized SF adventures.
So imagine that, 1978, Americans would be able to latch on to the Doctor Who phenomena.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, the show had already, been on in England for so long. I really thought it came to the U.S. sooner than that, than 78.
But PBS was known for bringing over British shows, so this fit with the format.
Yeah, and it says they did run it in 75, but that was it. So, I mean, yeah, it's great that they finally did have it regularly, because it really was. I think it was more of an underground hit, but a lot of people we know, sci-fi geeks, actually loved it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It said, due to the popularity of Star Wars, WOR has taken the rights to this latest Who series. So, when you hear reports of Star Wars taking the world by storm, it truly did, because it opened up the possibilities of all different science fiction films, television shows, books, everything to the mass public consciousness.
It's amazing. I mean, really, I don't even think of Doctor Who as being anything like Star Wars.
Not at all.
Strong men on screen. In the midst of the futuristic film wave, two motion picture companies have made a back-to-basics move in the realm of screen heroics, as Star Wars and Close Encounters crews feverishly attempt to get their sequels underway. Warner Communications and Paramount plan an equally expensive assault on the visual series that is strictly earthbound as well as muscle-bound.
So the article goes on to say that plans for bringing Tarzan to the big screen, as well as Conan the Barbarian, are coming out of the phenomena of these science fiction films. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I see it more as a superhero thing, as the Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk were on TV. So why not bring some of these other things to life?
Yeah, I don't necessarily tie in Tarzan and Conan to Star Wars and Close Encounters. I like how the article says that Conan is closer to Tolkien than Star Wars, which, true, but not exactly. But I think what that they were looking at is the audience, not necessarily the subject matter. They realize that geeks like certain movies, and especially things that are based on literary works. These are classics, Tarzan and Conan. Why not take a shot at it?
It was a good idea. I mean, Conan was a hit, so they did kind of know the audience. It was something that did well in Hollywood.
Hi, this is Mike.
And this is Kyleigh.
And we are going to be talking about the article from The Empire Strikes Back, an interview with Gary Kurtz, who was a phenomenal producer that really was truly the right hand to George Lucas, and in many ways is credited with the direction of the actors on set, especially during Star Wars, after what has not often been reported, but is a fact, and that is the exhaustion that George Lucas suffered and was actually hospitalized for, and Gary Kurtz stepped in and did a phenomenal job in coaching up the actors. Oftentimes, Lucas unfortunately takes a bit of a hit when it comes to his direction of actors, especially when it comes to the prequels now, but Gary Kurtz is often credited with being able to get a lot out of Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher and, of course, Mark Hamill. But this article is focused around The Empire Strikes Back and the introduction of it. And, of course, we know that New Hope came out in 1977, and this article came out in 1978. And to be honest, I was so young in 1978 that I was not really fully aware of a sequel. I was still eating up every possible morsel of Star Wars I could possibly find. In fact, the action figures had barely been released by this point. But the article really, really explains a lot of things that we would consider urban legend or folklore now, such as the fact that there was going to be 12 episodes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when this came out, I was not even an idea or a fetus, but this was about 10 years before my time. But once I got into Star Wars at a pretty young age, I remember being incredibly overjoyed and excited because sequels to movies was not something I was exposed to a lot, mostly because a lot of sequels were not worth watching. And so when I found out there was a second Star Wars, I was absolutely over the moon. And that continued when I found out there was a third Star Wars. But the article specifically addresses the fact that even while they're still going through the process of making Empire Strikes Back, they already know and they've already got plans for a third. And you can tell that that's the direction that they're heading. They're not rushing a story. They know exactly what they need to be doing to avoid a formulaic sequel. He specifically uses Jaws 2 as an example of what not to do, where, you use the things that a lot of producers will use the things that they think made the first movie great and skip the things that really made it great. And I think that's one of the reasons that Empire is so many people's favorite of the three original movies. Mike, I think is it your favorite?
Oh, it's my favorite, and I mean it's arguably the best. Now, when I was 10 years old, Return of the Jedi was my favorite because it had the happy ending to it.
Good guy wins.
And right, but as I've gotten older, I realize just how high the bar was set by Empire with respect to its direction under Irvin Kershner, the writing by Lawrence Kasdan. And of course, Lee Brackett is mentioned in the article as having been the original screen playwriter, but she passed away due to cancer, if I'm not mistaken, after only turning in her first draft. She's credited with writing the many westerns, actually, and some of which were John Wayne films. So she was a prolific screenwriter of that era.
Yeah, she had 12 Tales. They say that was the Adventures of Luke Skywalker set, and that's kind of where it all started. Apparently, George took it after she passed and did some minor modifications, which is really his wheelhouse. But then, like you said, Mike, Kurtz came in and just pulled some things out of the actors that you hadn't seen in the first movie. And I, as a hobby, I cosplay as Leia in her many different forms. And Mike, you cosplay as Han Solo. Mm-hmm. And I think that when I'm looking for emotions and when I'm looking for things to mimic, the Empire's probably the go-to movie because of the breadth of, emotion and character that comes out.
Yes, especially for our two characters, because for Han Solo, he's really given a central character in this particular episode, whereas in Return of the Jedi, he is diminished in his role to a great degree, and in New Hope, he's obviously not introduced until well into the first/second act. But in Empire, he is, immediately in the film with, the speaking part to Luke regarding the meteor, and then ultimately saves Luke, and then he saves Leia, and then Leia saves him. It's back and forth hero. As we go, right? Yeah. And we find him ultimately at the end being even the one that is tortured to draw Luke in. So there's a lot going on with the Han Solo character, and I think that's where Kasdan shines as the screenwriter, because he knows how to write Han Solo. So that's what makes this one so much fun. But I think it's great to read about in the article again what Gary Kurtz says about the fact that he thought that they would not actually end up numbering the episodes because it would create confusion, because they had the idea of writing the prequels and producing the prequels at some point. But this is, in fact, the first film in which they do put the Episode 5 title on it. I think he mentioned maybe calling it Episode 2, but then it would get confusing because of the prequel setup that would ultimately exist. And then in the 1981 re-release of New Hope is the first time we see Episode 4. So for anybody who didn't see it in the theaters or had a form of the memory effect, what am I thinking of for the Mandela effect? Yeah, the Mandela effect. So if you're having the Mandela effect, you're thinking, oh my goodness, I don't remember seeing that. Well, you're right. In the theater, the episodes didn't exist on New Hope. In fact, there's been a lot of changes to the title sequences throughout the years. So the VHS is what many of us watched it on or rewatched it on over the years. So I think it's pretty fascinating, too, that the episodes were not initially thought about, but now they're extensively expressed. That and the fact there were supposed to be 12 films. And, of course, what is even more ironic about that is I think Lucas suffers from his own Mandela effect, because in recent interviews he's claimed that, no, there was only ever supposed to be 9. But you can go back and see him on the Today Show saying 12. Gary Kurtz here in this article in Starlog is saying 12. And this is 1978.
Yeah, her original stories were 12 stories.
Right. Of course, Lee Brackett only came on for The Empire, though. She had not been previously attached to the ideas that Lucas had presented, as far as I know anyway. That had always been Lucas's ideas going all the way back to the early 70s, prior to American Graffiti. And then Brackett came on and then wrote the first draft and then passed away, and Kasdan picked it up. Lucas, in fact, didn't even have to give her the credit, but did it to honor her for having actually added to the screenplay, even though they didn't use much of hers ultimately, according to the annotated screenplays.
Well, I like, back to the article, I like how they emphasize that it's, what did he call it? Said it's an anti-sequel theme. So, like, it can stand on its own. And at any given time, you can watch one of these 3 movies, and the middle one doesn't feel like a middle one, other than, as a child, I was traumatized because the bad guys won, and I didn't know there would be a 3rd movie.
Right.
So that was upsetting to me. But as an adult, I can go back and watch this one, and it has a beginning, end. It is a phenomenally standalone.
It is. Of course, Joss Whedon has criticized Empire for being a film in which there was clearly a cliffhanger, so to speak, to it that we're left with. But when you see the 3 in totality, you see what Lucas originally written was one full movie, and then you realize that when he was done writing the New Hope treatment, it was far too big for just one film. He had really completed one film in just that first act. So to break it up into 3 acts over 3 films was a unique idea. Of course, now we see it, again, you talk about formulas. Every film seems like it needs to be a trilogy, whether it deserves to be a trilogy or not. And I think that's where you see what you talked about, Jaws 2, that Kurtz referred to, is that you end up with films that either were written with no intent of ever having either A, a sequel, or B, a trilogy, or this misbegotten idea that everything must have a prequel now, ever since the prequels of Star Wars. Of course, now they call them origin stories or some other title in order to
capitalize
reboot
on that good money. Well, and that's some of it too, is when, if a movie goes over well, they're going to make that cash grab really fast, slap together something, call it number 2, and throw it out there. And this was intentionally steered away from that. They tried new effects that had never been done before. It wasn't just a rehashing of the original thing or grabbing, the most popular scene and changing it slightly and slapping it into a different planet or a different, setting. And I really appreciate that, because that's a lot more thought than goes into a lot of sequels now, but they purposely went out of their way to find out what made it special, and arguably some of that's whatever that magic is missing in the newer movies, and I don't know if that's nostalgia or what talking, but I feel like they missed the mark there with the new movies, where you just didn't go back and break down what made it absolutely magical. But he really captured New Hope back in Empire.
Well, yeah, and I think that what I've said for as long as these new ones have existed is that there was no showrunner, so to speak. That's a contemporary term, and that didn't really exist at that point. But Lucas was the idea guy, and as critical as we as Star Wars fans, or at least some Star Wars fans, have been of Lucas, especially regarding the prequels, it was always his idea. So he knew where he wanted to get to, beginning, middle, and end. Whether we agree or not as to how he got to some of those spots can be argued, but he knew where he wanted to go with it. Unfortunately, with these new ones, we were never really certain who was writing out the totality of the story, and it seems as though they were changing the story based on reaction of fans or reactions to critics or reactions to whomever, rather than just simply writing the stories themselves and allowing the stories to tell the tale. And ultimately, I guess we got to wrap up. We're running short on time, but I think ultimately the idea that this is the hero's journey is what you have to follow, and it's not about writing the characters. It's about what do the characters do that are already written when you put them in any situation. The story then writes itself. You put the hero in the story, their very existence guides the path of the story. These seem to have been...
Because you're building a character. You're building a consistent character with personality and with, pre-existing attributes. You can't just change those every time
No.
He sells a better action figure or makes a cooler costume.
Yeah, and I think that's what made these so exciting. I think it's what Kurtz talked about early on in the article, was that it was going to be a big space reunion with Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford. We were going to get the characters that we loved once again, and we were going to put them in a completely different situation in which they were on the wrong end of the film throughout. And of course, we could go on and on about the film itself and how many wonderful beats it has.
Galactica heroes Dirk Benedict and Richard Hatch explain their swashbuckling alter egos, Starbuck and Apollo, two crazy kind of guys.
When I saw the title of this article, I couldn't help to think about Steve Martin on Saturday Night Live.
That's what I was thinking.
We're two wild and crazy guys.
So that is where they got that from, right? If that was on before this article?
I may imagine so. Dirk Benedict and Richard Hatch, do you consider them two wild and crazy guys?
Well, no, maybe, maybe Starbuck's character was. I always liked Starbuck's character. So he was the good-looking one, He was the standard handsome stud of the show.
Mm-hmm. Did you always like him? Like
I
through
did.
everything that he did?
Oh yeah. Like later on, he went to do the A-Team and loved that show and loved him on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Dirk Benedict, of course, I've seen him at cons, and Richard Hatch too. But I know
Richard Hatch has been a staple at cons.
Yeah.
Like he's right up there with Lou Ferrigno and
the ones who do go and they
Captain Kirk. There's some that just do it all the time.
Went to Dragon Con every year.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Sure.
So Dirk Benedict was at Volcon one year, and they did. That they had, their main Star Trek guest, that was the year one of the years I did the banquet, and I got to sit at Dirk Benedict's table.
Oh, nice.
It was pretty interesting. So yeah, I found out he's vegetarian, and at the time he had two young children, and that's mostly what he talked about. He said what he was into at the time was raising his kids, but he was a pretty interesting guy. And so this article says, yeah, this is really interesting how he never really tried to do anything, but things just happened. He got acting jobs when he wasn't really trying that hard. And then he went 2 years without a job, but he still survived. He just had fun all that time, fishing and whatever, doing stuff like that, pursuing other hobbies.
Yeah, it just happens with some people. You hear horror stories with some actors just going out for parts and they never get them, and then others just fall in their lap constantly. but he looks like he struck gold with this part. He wouldn't know how long the Battlestar Galactica fan base would continue to love him decades later.
Yeah, it was a short-lived show, but the fans still carried it on.
What about Richard Hatch?
And he's a nice guy too. I mean, I think his character on the show, what wasn't really as interesting for me when I was watching it as a child.
Mm-hmm.
But he is a really interesting guy. I mean, he's very philosophical. He's a science fiction fan, which is really neat.
I always like that when actors love the parts that they're in the world of sci-fi because they're a fan of the genre. So they get it. I think that they work extra hard, especially at the technobabble, because they know how important it is to us who follow the series.
And I like how he says, like he thought of Apollo as a Renaissance man. I mean, it kind of makes me want to go back and watch the show. Like, really? He was?
It's totally rewatchable. It's another show, a Glenn Larson project, that and Buck Rogers. I mean, they're products of the time, but you can rewatch them now, and they just have a certain amount of fun factor to them.
Yeah, you have to go back and just enjoy the campiness. And this one wasn't as campy as Buck Rogers.
Not at all.
I mean, it did have some good stuff in it. It was actually in space, and it had all the characters, and it had that heart, and that liveliness. And Starbuck and Apollo, the way they were best friends, the way they played off each other, it was great. And it's so different from the remake, which I guess we don't have to talk about. But how they changed the characters in the remake.
I kind of wish they just, when they did that remake, they just call it something else because it's so different.
Yeah, it was very loosely inspired by this original show.
Presenting the world's greatest Mego heroes. Mego's new line of 14-inch figures. The world's mightiest mortal, Shazam! 14-inch Mego figures. Gotham's Dark Knight, it's Batman! 14-inch Mego figures. Here's the Man of Steel, Superman. 14-inch Mego figures. 24 points of articulation, multiple accessories. Start your 14-inch figure collection today by Mego.
We have on with us a very special guest. If you're into Mego collecting especially, you'll know the name. It's none other than Dr. Mego himself, Paul Clarke. Welcome, Paul.
Hi. Well, thanks for having me.
Hey, Paul. You a Starlog fan growing up?
Oh, absolutely. Starlog was pretty much the way you found out what was coming up.
And it's interesting, in this issue of Starlog, we have the 1978-1979 Science Fiction Merchandise Guide. Mm-hmm. You had to be a fan of ordering things through the mail when you were a kid.
Absolutely. I had a Darth Vader poster on my bedroom wall and the movie poster, the first Hildebrandt.
I love that artwork.
I still have it up on the wall in my house.
Well, did you order things like, we're just going to go through this catalog and talk about some of these companies? I know some of them were epic. How about the Intergalactic Trading Company out of Longwood, Florida? Did you ever remember them?
Yeah, I was also into Space 1999.
Yes, they were known for having that. Even list that here.
It was near like Star Wars or Star Trek. Yeah. But
it says right here, Star Wars, Galactica, Space 1999, etc. Pictures, posters, buttons, badges, T-shirt. I remember having the Commander Koenig doll.
Yes, Mattel. That was Mattel. Mego only had the license in Europe for Palitoy.
Now, how about this? The Imperial Trading Post out of Honolulu, Hawaii.
Yeah, I don't think I ever got there, but yeah, it was. Looks like somebody's running out of their apartment. That's under. Was he doing costumes?
A little bit of everything there. Even the Sci-Fi Search Service.
Posters and costumes, yeah. Yeah, back then before videotapes, all you had was slides.
Slides and films. There's a whole section here for films, like Thunderbird Films, Hyperspace Enterprises, Canterbury Films out of Great Neck, New York. They sell Super 8 and 16mm sound films.
Yeah, it was actually Great Neck, New York is where Mego's located now.
Isn't that wild? I wonder how far away Mego is from 15 Canterbury Road.
I think I know where Canterbury is.
Do you remember mailing away from Mego dolls?
Absolutely. Heroes World advertised in the comic books. And I remember going to my mom with, a couple, well-worn dollars and asking to get a check to mail away for 4 to 6 weeks to get a Mego Iron Man.
That Mego Iron Man was epic. I love that when you looked at his face, you could see his eyes and flesh underneath his helmet. That little attention to detail. Instead of painting the eyes black and the mouth, you know what I mean?
Like comics.
There's someone underneath here.
But
This is amazing.
I think they wanted to convey that this was a guy, not like a robot.
All right, how about this company, Tally-Ho Studios? They sell Super Mint gum card sets, Star Wars life-size figures. Now, I've heard them called gum cards before, but never Super Mint. I know they make figures like large-size dolls, but I never heard them being called life-size before.
Yeah, there was no rules back then.
James Bond items, too.
Well, they used to have, remember, somebody made, I forget who, but had jointed life-size superheroes and Planet of the Apes. They were like cardboard cutouts that you could...
I definitely remember that. I remember having the Spider-Man one. Yeah. And a skeleton one. The skeleton one glowed in the dark. And I believe my grandfather ordered it from Famous Monsters of Filmland. Another great magazine where you could order stuff from.
Yeah, most of the time, whenever I asked for something, I got no. No. That's the default answer when you're a kid. No. Can I get this? No. Can we go here? No.
How about this one? There's even props that you could order. Now, this is what really impresses me for 78. You got to figure there was no internet. There was no really mass market way of designing things, building. No laser printers or what should I say, 3D printers.
Yeah.
Hyperspace Enterprises out of Landers, California, was making finely detailed replicas from Star Wars, troop and solo blasters and lightsabers.
Oh boy.
Damn. That's pretty cool. You have to send away for the catalog. That was a big thing at that time. Send away for a catalog.
Yes, because that was your website.
Yes.
In the modern Polaris. That was how you had to find out what somebody sold. There were comic book dealers that used to make a catalog.
Oh, you're not kidding. I remember getting the Mile High catalog and feeling like I was holding a pot of gold. Even if I couldn't get all the stuff, I just loved looking at the catalog.
That's right. Just got to learn a lot just reading it.
Yes.
That's what we did with our time. We poured over merchandise guides like this, just dreaming about the stuff that was out there. Yeah, if you take 35 cents to send for a catalog just to see what they were selling.
Yes, you're right. In fact, under the listing of special services, and I'm really impressed because this section of anytime Starlog has one of these merchandise guys, they print it on that yellow paper, kind of like what was in Yellow Pages in the phone book.
Yes.
Because you knew that if it was Yellow Pages, I'm looking up to buy something. I got money ready. How about this one? Connecticon 2 out of Hartford, Connecticut. Never heard of that one. Galacticon. Yeah. So that had to be something that was really pushing Battlestar Galactica, I imagine.
Probably,
Check out these guests, though. Forrest J. Ackerman, Jim Danforth. Mission is only $2.
I mean, Battlestar Galactica is less well known now, but that was like your TV Star Wars.
It sure was.
That gave you more bang for your buck week after week than being able to go to a Star Wars movie.
I mean, as much as we look at this nostalgia of these old toys and collectibles, I remember when Mego came back. You mentioned getting your first Iron Man doll. I remember getting the Batman. I was super excited about all the Batman and Robin and Joker and Penguin. I used to watch Batman and Star Trek back to back on Channel 11 Alive.
That's right. I was there too.
It's Channel 11, WPIX, New York.
Oh man, having all those Mego dolls on the floor, it was so much fun. Me and my brother playing, and Mego brought back this excitement a few years ago.
Yep, we did. I would watch. I watch I Dream of Jeannie just to get to Star Trek. You'd watch a show just to get to another show, because if you walked away, somebody else would change the channel. You had to camp out in the living room.
It was a treacherous family you had there, Paul.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm one of 7.
Whoa.
So you, and I was number 6. So you had to hustle.
Well, you know what? When Mego came back in 2018, we hustled to get a lot of those Mego dolls. And I think because collectors were clamoring for them, and more are coming out. I mean, especially with all these licenses like the DC Heroes and the Monsters. I mean, let's talk about how Mego now is recreating the feeling of the 70s for this generation.
Well, Marty's running the company. I mean, the man that owned it in the 70s owns it now. I'm there just to fill in what was and what we should be doing. You know, I try to bring a little bit of the old stuff into the new. But I have been begging for a couple of years for Planet of the Apes. I was like, that was quintessential Mego. And Star Trek, absolutely Mego. And we want to go do a lot into Star Trek because it's a very loyal fan base that really embraces Mego.
What about some of the other licenses that are being brought in?
Horror is the biggest seller. Horror outsells every other category. So
I can believe it. The detail on that creature from the Black Lagoon is amazing.
Oh, that's. I'm an old monster kid, so I wanted to do a Bela Lugosi Dracula, Karloff Frankenstein.
Yes.
You know, the Lon Chaney Wolfman and the creature. And I said to Mego, we can just keep making creatures because they will just keep selling.
What about the DC superheroes? Let's talk about that.
That is completely awesome. We started with the 14-inch, and now we're in the 8-inch, trying not to just do – I don't want to just do what Mego did in the past. I want to kind of, you know, there's so many variations now of the DC superheroes. I'd like to try to do more, you know, into a younger generation. So instead of doing the Barry Allen Flash, we did the Wally West Flash. Instead of the Hal Jordan Green Lantern, we did the John Stewart. Doesn't mean we won't do Barry and Hal, but just right off the bat, I want to do something different, kind of bring in a younger crowd.
And what do you think the response has been? What have you heard the response being from those of us who bought Mego back in the 70s and 80s?
Seems like everybody's digging it. I mean, everyone was really thrilled that we did a black and gray Batman. You know, he's not smiling. He's not the TV Batman. He's not the Mego Batman. You know, he's the Dark Knight detective. You know, it's more like a Batman Year One with a big cape.
And that's what I think is exciting. We're looking at this merchandise catalog, and we look at all the things that used to be available on the market that aren't available anymore. But when it comes to Mego, we could still get that excitement going into stores and finding current Mego dolls. And
that's right.
It's like it's taking a blast to the past.
Yeah, thank you. That's what we're working on. You know, that's what we're trying to do. Keep it vintage for the old guys and bring in a new generation who has grown up. Mego is legendary. Everybody knows Mego. As Marty and I start to go out and do some shows, people already knew it. We didn't have to explain anything. You know, when we went into Target and then into Walmart, you know, the buyers were Mego fans.
What's the best place for our listeners to check out Mego if they're not familiar with where to find Mego? Well, the Mego Museum is still got to be the best resource. MegoMuseum.com. We have Mego Corp. We've got the Mego Ambassadors Facebook page. MegoFigures.com to see what product we've done since coming back. We're always trying to do the past, but also keep an eye to the future. And we just announced the deal with Hasbro to do 8-inch G.I. Joe, Snake Eyes, and Storm Shadow. They'll be available on Hasbro Pulse. It's absolutely amazing. We saw the sculpts for those, and they're epic. There's no doubt about it that if Mego had that license, if there was such a thing, we know that G.I. Joe, that's a Hasbro product. But if Mego was involved in the 80s doing that, this is what it would be. So, I mean, it's like you said, it's looking to the future, but it still has a homage to the past.
Yep, that's the key.
Well, we're going to put a link to all those sites that you mentioned in our show notes, so our listeners could just look below, click on those links, because we love Mego. And Paul, thanks again for your time. We look forward to seeing you again at another convention.
Yes, you will.
Art the Magazine closes out with a classified section, which I loved reading the classified sections, and we're going to pick one to talk about. This one says, Rent an Alien. Looking for something wild and unique to spark your next party? We offer a selection of over a dozen different completely costumed aliens, many favorites from movies and TV such as C-3PO, the mutant from This Island Earth, and The Fly. Terrific for personal appearance promotions and special events. Use your imagination and we'll supply the creature that will make sure the guests never forget your party. Prices range from $50 to $100 for a 1-hour appearance, depending on which alien you want to travel in the New York City area. Contact Starlog Magazine, Rent an Alien.
Oh my God, that's like a rich kid's party or something. Do you want to have the Fly at your party?
Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long and may the force be with you. Nanu Nanu.